Hello all, Austin the Brimstone here, coming from a very cold and rainy California. We are still getting some dark winter weather over here. It's totally wild, but it is the perfect weather to grab a nice big book, maybe snuggle by the fireplace and hop into a magical world. So I finally read ElfQuest, something I should have done a long time ago. ElfQuest is a great fantasy epic. It is an iconic piece of 1980s pulp culture and convention culture.
All over the independently published fantasy comic ElfQuest. What makes this little comic so popular? Who better to ask than a few of the hundreds of fans here? They waited over an hour to get up close and personal with ElfQuest's husband and wife team, Richard and Wendy Peeney.
They address a lot of social issues in there that you don't see other places. They're a lot more acceptive of outside of the norm kind of thinking. And the artwork is beautiful, the colors are wonderful, the story is well put together. It's a great book.
It's kind of like the Pixies of comic books. You know the band, the Pixies, right? Nobody listened to the Pixies, but they say that everyone that listened to the Pixies started a band. ElfQuest is the Pixies of comic books. It was never the bestseller, but everyone that read ElfQuest ended up making and creating something. I even have some vintage ElfQuest fanzines and interviews that really shed light on this. There's so much to go into that would really be its own video, looking at vintage ElfQuest ephemera. If that's something you guys want to see, all that 80s convention, sci-fi, fantasy con goodness, just let me know, I'll do a video on it. But today's video, we're not going to be talking about everything around ElfQuest, which is usually what's discussed, but rather ElfQuest itself. Yeah, I actually read the complete ElfQuest, the original 1980s run of ElfQuest is compiled in this beautiful paperback compilation from Dark Horse Comics. Dark Horse Comics has always done the best definitive comic releases, so they always do such great work, and here what they've done is they've taken every single issue of the original ElfQuest comic from the 80s and put it all into one beautiful black and white bound book. And before I actually talk about the content itself, I have to review this compilation because it's really, really wonderful. Now, there are lots of different ways you can read ElfQuest. You can go to the ElfQuest website, where the authors of ElfQuest, that would be Wendy and Richard Peeney, they are a couple that have been writing ElfQuest since the 70s. They are amazing. I mean, relationship goals, am I right? Wendy and Richard, the ElfQuest lore masters. But they've made all of the ElfQuest comic free on the internet. They did it way back when, I think like 2007 or 8. They wanted to make their comic to be one of the first that was entirely uploaded online for free. So if you don't want to pay $1, you can read all of ElfQuest free of charge. They have released it for the good of the public to enjoy. And you can read it online in full color as it was meant to be seen, because it was originally released in black and white, though it was later re-released in color. I believe the black and white ElfQuest is from the 70s, and it was released independently by the Peeneys. They were stapling together these comic books and selling them out of their house in the Bay Area. They were it just came from that great kind of hippie movement of the 70s, where you had all these creatives in the Bay Area just making things. And they were creators. They never sat idle. They made ElfQuest, and they did it without money. They did it without a publisher. They just did it. And they made their own roleplay games and action figures. They had their own little business, and that is respectable. Like, that's the American dream right there, that they just made ElfQuest in their backyard. It's always been the most successful independent comic book ever made. Having the artwork in this black and white, like, it doesn't take the story at all. Maybe, I think the Peonies wanted it to be in color, because, they were just held back by home printing presses. But I actually think it's quite nice in black and white. I think the art in line work really pops. And that's the first thing I have to talk about with ElfQuest, is before we even get into the nuanced plot, the artwork is so amazing. For a comic book from the 1970s, it's so contemporary, because ElfQuest was one of the first comics to really make use of what was called Japanimation at the time, now known as anime. This is one of the first manga-inspired American comics. It probably is the first to ever release. So even though these comics are from the mid-70s, they look like they were made yesterday. They've got a very anime look to them that I think kids and teenagers today could really get behind. ElfQuest seems to be one of those things that survives. Now, ElfQuest's plot and writing is absolutely superb. It's an epic like Lord of the Rings that follows a band of elves as they lose their land. Their forest is burned down, so they globetrot and look for a new home and find that what they've been holed up in, which is this forest where they've lived forever in peace, they're called the Wolf Riders. This is my custom action figure I made. They made real ElfQuest action figures, but they're really, really expensive. So I just took a Marvel dwarf figure from the Toy Biz line, and I put on a Hobbit wolf, and I called it good. This is my Wolf Rider. So they globetrot and they discover all the different tribes of elves. I won't spoil, but you can figure, since there's air, land, sea, what different types of elves they went into. And that's basically the whole comic. They meet these elves, and each tribe has their own problem, and they have to unite all the tribes together to sort of bring all of elfdom together and discover a dark secret about their homeworld. And I won't say anything other than that dark secret, which is revealed in the comic, is amazing. The twist at the end is just awesome. I love it. And this is a complete comic. It was one of the first comic books ever written to have a beginning, middle, and end. So even though it was serialized, when that first issue was published, the Peonies knew exactly how they were going to end it. So even though this is a collection of a decade's worth of comics, it feels like a graphic novel. Everything that's introduced has a proper payoff, and every plot line receives a proper ending. That is so satisfying. I read the Sonic the Hedgehog comics for a long time. I read all 400 issues, and boy, talk about inconsistency, right? There were points where the comic got really good, and there were points where the comic got really bad. And when it ended, and I say ended in quotation marks because it kind of got canceled, none of the plot lines ever got wrapped up. Not that it mattered, because that comic went on for 20 years, and there were so many plot lines they never bothered to close. Again, that's a rant for another time, but I was just so satisfied that by the end of this, there were no holes left. And this is only volume 1. There's actually 7 tomes of ElfQuest. Yeah, ElfQuest is like the Bible. Like, you could buy a whole bookshelf of ElfQuest tomes to read the entire history of ElfQuest. There are prequels, there are stories set thousands of years in the future, there are direct sequels to this one, but honestly, not looking at the bigger picture, because I know, you get overwhelmed by that stuff. You see all those comics and you're like, where do I even begin? This is perfection. This is self-contained, this is solid, the art's amazing, the dialogue is fun, and ElfQuest is just super, super cool. As for age range, ElfQuest is a little dark. I wouldn't hand this to like a 6 or a 7-year-old. I would say more along the 13, 14, 15. Maybe once you hit puberty and you get hit with the truck that is life, you're ready for ElfQuest. There is some violence in the comic, and there is a lot of mention of sex. Although nothing is shown, a lot is implied. And that was another thing ElfQuest did that completely broke new ground, is that at the height of the 1980s and the AIDS epidemic, that there was a comic book that had characters that, well, not only were gay, some of the elves, they swing both ways, but also they just had happy sex lives, both the males and the females. and to them it was just another part of life. ElfQuest has a lot of wonderfully happy relationships. The family unit of our main character, Cutter, we follow Cutter, Lita, and their 2 kids, is absolutely amazing. It's something you just don't see in storytelling. A father, a wife, and 2 kids that all love each other. They are the full family unit. It's written so well, it makes it feel like you're reading like The Incredibles. The Incredibles is always what I go to, because that's like a perfect family story. And I really love that dynamic. When you have a hero introduced that's already a dad and has 2 kids, that gives him really unique obstacles, because you have a character that can grow older and learn about life and fatherhood, and then you also have his undying protection to his children. Cuddle protects his tribe, his family, by extension, but really what he protects is his kids. So there's always a real sense of danger when you see enemies in ElfQuest, because even though you know that Cuddle and Lita are superhuman elves with amazing abilities, it doesn't really matter whether they make it through or not. It's their kids they have to protect. So that creates a lot of interesting tension in the story and can make a lot of those action scenes feel less like filler and really impactful. So ElfQuest, it's amazing. It's got a lot of weight. It's a story about family and love. If you like Narnia, if you like classic fantasy, you'll really enjoy ElfQuest. It's not quite Lord of the Rings, and I know the Peonies themselves have said not to compare them to Tolkien or Lord of the Rings. It's definitely got the scope of Lord of the Rings, but it doesn't take itself too seriously, which is nice. The comic has a wonderful sense of humor, and in ways it can feel a bit like a Saturday morning cartoon, but a really good Saturday morning cartoon, like Batman the Animated Series or the Dungeons and Dragons show that Paul Dini wrote. Randy Peony, Paul Dini, it's all connected. It will be the best $25 to $30 you ever spend. You can't put this down once you pick it up. I bought this and thought, well, it'll be well worth the money. It'll be like a month's worth of reading. And like 3 days later, I went, well, there you go. I'm now ElfQuested. I read it. I did it. ElfQuest. Coffee break? You really want to be warped away to a fantasy world with the full shebang. Good characters, good artwork, good writing, fun settings, adventure, family, romance, love, ElfQuest. Oh, and the romance in this book, by the way, is great. I actually would highly recommend ElfQuest to a female audience. I know this comic book had huge crossover appeal, sold well with both boys and girls. Wonderful, amazing female characters, and none of the elf guys wear clothing. None of the ladies do either. It's very nice. The elf ladies are very nice. So are the guys, so equality. Showed off my Wolf Rider custom, but I didn't show off my mermaid here. This is an elf mermaid. I've talked about her before on the channel, but I will always use an excuse to talk about this. This is great right here. Oh, I'm gonna have to buy those ElfQuest figures now. Have to take out a mortgage, bank loan, and go to the bank and be like, I really need an action figure of Lita, okay? She comes with Petal Wing.